Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Plato. You know him, one of history's most influential thinkers. We're going beyond the typical textbook stuff, though.
Right.
Trying to uncover some really surprising things about his life, and then see how those ideas actually, well, connect to all of us today.
You know, the material we have here, what's fascinating is it's not just some dry old biography.
Right.
We get these like little glimpses into Plato's personality,
Yeah.
his struggles, how he impacted the world.
Yeah, it's like we're getting to know Plato as like a person,
Yeah,
not just some name in a philosophy book.
absolutely.
And speaking of names, did you know that Plato wasn't even his real name?
Yeah, that's true. It was Aristocles. Aristocles, yeah. But Plato stuck, and there are all these like competing theories about how he got that nickname.
Okay.
Some say it was because of his physique.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he was like a wrestler as a young man. Like, imagine if your nickname was based on your build.
I know, right? I don't know, what would mine be? Lanky. I don't know.
But then other sources say the nickname was about his intellect, you know, the broad scope of his thinking.
Ah, okay. So we've got broad shoulders or like a broad mind.
And that question, right, about was he a man of action or just a man of ideas?
Right.
That's this tension that just runs through his whole life, his whole work.
It's like this duality, this contrast.
Yes.
And speaking of contrast, Plato's relationship with Socrates is shrouded in a bit of mystery, isn't it?
It really is. We never, ever hear Plato speak directly in his writings. All of his ideas are presented through these dialogues he wrote, almost all of them starring Socrates.
It's like Socrates is the star of Plato's like philosophical play.
Exactly. But this raises the question, how do we separate Plato's voice from Socrates?
Right.
I mean, were Plato's writings an accurate portrayal of what Socrates actually taught, or did he use Socrates as a mouthpiece for his own ideas?
That's a good question, right? Like, how can we be sure that we're hearing Socrates' ideas and not just Plato's take on them?
Yeah, this is what we call the Socratic problem.
The Socratic problem.
And it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Because all we have is Plato's word for it. Some scholars think Plato might have used Socrates to kind of advance his own philosophical agenda. But then others think, no, Plato was really faithfully representing his teacher's views.
Okay, so it's like we're trying to solve this historical puzzle,
Right.
but we've got like pieces missing.
Exactly. And to make it even more complicated, we have these other writers like Xenophon, Aristophanes. They also wrote about Socrates, but their versions of Socrates, they're very different from Plato's.
So who was the real Socrates? Was it the wise, ironic figure that Plato gives us, or was it somebody else entirely?
It's a debate that still goes on today.
Wow.
So we may never really know the true historical Socrates, but even with that uncertainty,
Right.
no doubt, Socrates had a huge influence on Plato. However, he wasn't the only one.
That's right. There were other figures that shaped his thinking, too. And I think one of the most important is Pythagoras.
Oh, Pythagoras. Most people just know him for the Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah.
Right, you probably learned it in school.
Oh, I've got vague memories of triangles and equations and stuff.
But Pythagoras, he was way more than just, you know, some geometry whiz.
Right.
He saw the whole universe in terms of numbers.
Yeah.
He believed that numbers were the fundamental principles behind everything.
Or like a cosmic math equation.
Yeah, kind of. Imagine a perfect circle. You can draw a circle on paper, right? But it'll never be truly perfectly round. But for Pythagoras, that perfect circle, the ideal form, exists in a separate realm.
Okay.
A realm of pure thought. And the circles we draw are just imperfect copies.
So for Pythagoras, there's like this perfect ideal version of everything existing somewhere beyond our physical world.
Exactly. And that's a concept that deeply influenced Plato.
You know, that must have been mind-blowing, especially back then.
Absolutely. And you know what's fascinating? Those ideas are still relevant today. Think about the scientific method. Its reliance on observation, creating hypotheses, mathematical models.
Right.
These are echoes of Pythagorean thought.
Wow.
Seeking to understand the universe through patterns and numbers.
It's like we're still following a path that Pythagoras laid out centuries ago.
In many ways, yes. And even our legal systems, with their emphasis on justice and fairness, they draw inspiration from these abstract principles.
That's incredible.
That Pythagoras explored.
It really shows how influential his ideas were. But before we jump into Plato's theory of forms, which builds on all of this, I think we need to talk about two other philosophers,
Yes.
Heraclitus and Parmenides.
Yes, these two guys represent opposite ends of a philosophical spectrum. Heraclitus saw the world as this place of constant change and flux. He's famously quoted as saying, "You can't step in the same river twice,"
Right. Okay.
because the water is always flowing, always changing.
So everything is in motion.
Exactly. And he believed that everything exists in this state of opposition, hot and cold, day and night, life and death.
Wow.
And these opposing forces, they were constantly interacting, creating the ever-changing reality that we experience. Now, Parmenides, he had a totally different view. He believed in an unchanging, eternal reality. He thought change was just an illusion.
Wait, so he thought everything was static, like frozen in time.
Yeah. He thought that the true reality was one unchanging and eternal.
That's a pretty mind-blowing concept when you contrast it with Heraclitus.
It is a powerful contrast.
One sees constant change and the other sees complete stillness.
And that debate, right, that debate between change and permanence, between what is and what becomes, that lies at the very heart of Plato's theory of forms.
Okay, so we've got all these contrasting ideas kind of swirling around.
Yeah.
The influence of Socrates, the Pythagorean emphasis on abstract thinking, and this big debate about change versus permanence. I am ready for Plato to step onto the stage and lay down his theory.
Let's dive into the forms.
This is what he's most famous for, right?
Absolutely.
This attempt to answer the question, what makes a thing what it is?
One of the cornerstones of Western philosophy.
Yeah.
It's his attempt to answer what makes a thing a thing. Think about it. What makes a chair a chair? Even if it's like, a different shape or size or material than any other chair you've ever seen.
I guess there's some essential chairness
Yes.
that they all share, even if they look different.
Exactly. And that's the core of his theory. He believed that for every concept, chairness, beauty, justice, truth, whatever, there's a perfect, unchanging form of it that exists in a separate realm. And the things we see, the things we experience in the physical world are just imperfect copies of these forms.
It's like there's a cosmic design studio somewhere.
Yeah.
Where the perfect essence of everything exists.
Right.
The perfect chair, the perfect concept of justice.
Yeah.
And everything down here is just our attempt to live up to that ideal.
That's a great way to put it.
Man, this is pretty profound stuff. But I'm starting to see how it connects back to, my own experience.
Yeah.
Have you ever struggled to define abstract concepts like beauty or justice?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
And that's because, according to Plato, there's more to them than just, our individual opinions or perceptions.
Right.
There's an actual perfect form of beauty and a perfect form of justice out there in this realm of forms.
So we're all just chasing shadows, trying to grasp at something that exists on a higher plane.
In a way, yes. And that chase, that striving for knowledge and understanding of these forms, that's central to Plato's philosophy.
Yeah.
Now, if we accept this, right, if we understand the world the way that Plato did, as this reflection of perfect forms, it kind of raises another question. Where do we fit into all of this? Where do humans fit into this? And this leads us to one of Plato's most intriguing ideas, and that's the nature of the soul.
Okay, so how did he view the soul?
Plato believed the soul was immortal and that it went through a cycle of reincarnation.
Reincarnation. So, our souls have lived many lives before this one.
That's right. And he even took it further. He thought that true knowledge came from remembering what our souls had learned in these past lives.
Whoa, so learning isn't about, filling an empty vessel.
Right.
It's more like uncovering something that's already within us.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a wild idea, right? What if everything we learn is really just us remembering something we already knew at some point?
It makes me think about those moments when, you suddenly grasp a complex idea.
Yes.
You have that flash of insight.
Yeah.
Is that just your soul having a flashback to a previous life?
Maybe. Plato even gave these vivid descriptions of the afterlife and the process of reincarnation.
Wow.
It really makes you wonder, if it's true, how should we live our lives, this life?
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer to the whole carpe diem thing. So we've got these big cosmic ideas about the soul. And now I'm kind of wondering, how did Plato bring these concepts down to earth? Did he have any thoughts on how society should be run?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, his most famous work, The Republic, that's exactly what he does. He lays out his vision for an ideal society.
Okay, so what kind of world did he envision?
He imagined a society that's divided into three classes,
Okay.
reflecting the three parts of the soul:
Okay.
reason, spirit, and appetite.
I'm following.
Yeah.
So how do those parts of the soul, how do they actually translate into social classes?
Well, at the bottom, you have the workers, the
Mhm.
people, driven by their appetites, the producers of goods and services.
Right.
And then above them, you have the guardians.
Mhm.
These are the people, with a strong spirit, the protectors of the state. So your warriors, your soldiers.
Those who are driven by a sense of duty and courage, right?
Mm.
Okay, I got it. So, but then who's at the top?
At the very top
Yeah,
are the philosopher kings.
philosopher leaders.
Yes, Plato believed that these were the people who were best suited to rule because they were driven by reason
Okay.
and possessed this deep understanding of the forms,
Yeah.
especially the form of the good.
So they wouldn't be swayed by personal gain or power grabs.
Right.
They would be ruling for the good of everyone,
Yeah.
guided by wisdom and a true understanding of what is good and what is just.
That was the idea, at least.
Right.
But of course, this idea has been met with, plenty of criticism.
Sure.
Critics point out that even philosophers are susceptible to human flaws, and giving so much power to just a few people,
Right.
that could easily lead to tyranny.
Right, right. Imagine trying to put this into practice.
Yeah.
Could a society actually be governed by philosopher kings? Or is it just this utopian ideal that's just destined to fail in the real world?
These are great questions, right? And they've been debated for centuries.
Yeah.
Plato's Republic, it's probably less about giving us a, step-by-step instruction manual for government,
Right.
and more about sparking those kinds of discussions about justice and power and what the ideal society might look like.
It's a thought experiment on a grand scale.
Yes.
It really makes you think critically about how societies work and the qualities that we should look for in our leaders.
Exactly.
Is it wisdom or is it experience? Or is it charisma? What makes a good leader? How do we find them?
Right.
Yeah.
And here's another thing about Plato that people often overlook. He was a brilliant storyteller. He often used myths and allegories to help explain these really, complex philosophical ideas.
Oh yeah, the allegory of the cave.
Exactly.
One of the most famous stories ever in Western philosophy.
He uses the image of these prisoners trapped in a cave. They mistake shadows for reality
Yeah.
to represent our own limited perception of the world
It's a challenge to us to question what we think we know.
and to seek a deeper understanding of truth.
And then there's the myth of which describes the soul's journey through the afterlife and the process of reincarnation.
Right. Those stories, they're so powerful, they're so engaging. They stick with you long after you've read them.
That's the genius of Plato.
Mm.
He recognized how powerful stories could be to really capture people's imaginations and to get them to think about these big ideas in a new way. He wasn't just a philosopher, he was a poet. He used language to paint these incredible pictures that still resonate with us today. His work is full of these vivid images and metaphors
Right.
that help us grasp these really complex ideas. He really understood that stories can be such powerful tools for getting at the truth, for inspiring people to reflect.
So we've got the philosopher, we've got the political theorist, we've got the storyteller. Is there anything else we need to add to our portrait of Plato here?
Well, there's one more thing. His attempts to define, humanity itself.
No, this is good.
Yeah.
What did Plato think it meant to be human? One of his definitions was featherless biped.
A featherless biped. That's a pretty basic definition. I mean, that can describe a lot of animals.
You're right. And apparently the philosopher Diogenes the Cynic, he thought so too. The story goes that he brought a plucked chicken to Plato's academy and was like, "Behold, a man."
Oh, that's hilarious. So even back then, people were calling him out for, oversimplifying things. I guess even brilliant minds can miss the mark sometimes.
Yeah, but to be fair to Plato, he also said that humans were political animals.
Okay, so more than just a featherless biped.
Yeah, much more. This definition highlights his belief that humans are these inherently social creatures.
Yeah.
We thrive in organized communities.
It makes you wonder if our need for connection, for belonging, it's almost like hardwired into us.
It's a really interesting question, isn't it? And it speaks to Plato's enduring influence, I think. His work is like this vast wellspring of knowledge and insight that continues to inspire us and challenge us even today.
It's amazing to think how his work has echoed through time, influencing, countless thinkers, artists,
Right.
even political
I
systems.
mean, his ideas about justice and beauty and truth, the nature of reality itself,
Right.
they're still at the heart of so many of the biggest questions that we grapple with today.
So what does all this mean for us? The non-philosopher kings out there trying to just navigate our everyday lives.
I think Plato's legacy offers this really powerful invitation to all of us. It's this call to really examine our own assumptions about the world,
Yeah.
to question what we think we know,
Yeah.
and to strive for a deeper understanding of ourselves
Mhm.
and the universe around us.
So it's like he's saying, don't just accept things at face value.
Right.
Keep asking why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And never underestimate the power of stories. Plato shows us how stories can illuminate these complex ideas. They spark our imaginations,
Yeah.
and they can connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
It's a reminder that philosophy isn't just for, academics or people in ivory towers. It's really for all of us.
It's about engaging with these big questions, the questions that have puzzled humans for centuries. It's about seeking wisdom and striving to live a more meaningful life.
I think that's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Plato.
It's been quite a journey.
It has been. Before we go, I have one final thought-provoking question for our listeners.
Okay.
Which of Plato's ideas resonated most with you?
I'd encourage you to explore Plato's dialogues, see what speaks to you. There's always something new to discover in those timeless works.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking knowledge.